you finished your presentation, or you want to continue?
That concludes the presentation, thank you.
Okay. So first, let's do questions from the board, and then we'll do questions from the audience. Is that okay, Rita?
Sure.
Georgia, go ahead.
So with all this sound mitigation you're proposing to do, what is it going to do for the people that live higher up, not at the ground level, let's say? Is it going to help that at all?
I mean, I'm not, the fence, you know, again, I'm not an expert in sound, of course, sound travels all directions, so I don't know, from an up, it sounds straight up, but obviously the balls, the rubber surface on the paddles, about the 6 things we're proposing are certainly gonna make a difference, as you just saw in the demonstration. The fencing, I don't have any technical data on how that affects sound going up.
Mandy, any questions?
Will there be a set of rules by the pickleball court, for instance, demanding that people use the right equipment?
I think that's a really good idea, and I'm sure that the club would certainly be open to that.
And there's no lighting, so it's something that couldn't carry on into the evening time.
That's correct, and if you know the demographic over there, it's really older membership. We don't anticipate that the course would be used anytime after 5:30 at the latest.
Okay.
And it's mainly in season, so it's dark by 6 o'clock.
Right, but that was another query I had, whether the pickleball court could be used as an extra entertainment area in the evening by the club.
We use that lawn sometimes for golf events, we haven't used it for a dinner per se, but we do a dog show once a year, we do it on that lawn, so it's actively used, but not so much at night.
Did you ever look into building a concrete wall instead of a fence?
We have not. There's an existing concrete wall on the property line. I believe it's 6 foot tall.
No, just instead of that, I was just curious.
Yeah,
To
no.
explore.
No, we have not.
I mean, they're not expensive, concrete wall block, right? Would that, you think that would help sound attenuation?
I mean, I think, this acoustic material that's proposed is, again, we could get on their website if we wanted to dive into it further, but I mean, they've got some
No, I read up on it. Yeah.
examples of, where they're taking mechanical enclosures and just putting this on the fence, and it significantly reduces.
You said something earlier that fascinated me. Just because it goes down by, say, 5 or 6 decibels, it's more in a percentage.
I was just saying, it's not a direct ratio. So if you reduce the decibel level by 50%, that's not the same as what our ear perceives from a sound standpoint. So if we went back to one of those charts, it tells you that raindrops are at 40 to 50, and then all of a sudden you go up into the 60s and 70s, and you're getting a lawnmower, equipment. So it's not a direct ratio.
There was a comment made outside that we should talk about, and it was, will players want to use the ball and racket? You could probably have a sign there that insists that you wear white clothes or whatever. But I think it's a valid point. If people are coming into town to play, or they have visitors or guests, with guests of members of the little club would probably be able to use the pickleball courts, right? I don't know.
Guests, accompanied guests.
Accompanied
yes.
guests?
Sure.
Okay. We didn't talk also about player noise. In my watching pickleball, there's the sound of the racket and the ball, which we just heard, but there's also a lot of sound from the people playing because they're having a good time. So actually, I think that sound is almost as noisy and as distracting as the ball itself when I listen to it. And I don't know if we've really addressed player noise here. You've got comparisons here about noises from maintenance equipment, but I don't really think that's fair to interject that here. Obviously, there's going to be maintenance equipment, but it isn't running from 9 in the morning till 6 o'clock at night. It's maybe 15, 20 minutes at a time.
Agreed.
So we've received, questions from the audience in just a second. We've received lots and lots of letters and memos and emails from people in both the Hillside House and also from the St. Andrews Club, the bar of homes on the north side. I think that I could be mistaken, but I think we only had one person that was in favor of it, one resident in the Hillside House. Do you remember, were there any other letters that were?
No.
Okay. Part of this committee and the reason we meet is to not only protect the town, but protect the neighbors in the town. And we're very conscious of something being built, whether it's a house or a pool or a docks or pickleball courts, being acceptable to the neighbors that surround the property. And so we have that really strong dilemma there. So it's not, I know it's a recreational facility, I know you probably can do this, but I want the board to think seriously about the neighbors who are there that are most impacted by it, because they've been quite vocal in their comments. And now maybe if, well, Greg, would you or Trey have any comments? You've made them so far.
Well, I mean, I'm still a little confused about, sorry, where they said the peak level difference between hitting the hardball and softball appears to be negligible. I mean, I was out there, I could hear the difference. I'm assuming your sound people are not here today.
They're not there.
Okay. I mean, I would think that they would need to do everything they can to, I think the number one question here is the sound, obviously, and the noise. And you brought up a good point of the people who are playing. I mean, that would not be unlike tennis, you know, people playing tennis on tennis courts.
Can I make a point on that? I'm Edward Dalowitz, I'm on the board. There are tennis courts on the east side of Hillside House that have no soundproofing, no sound barrier. They're built right up to the property line. And I don't know if you've received complaints about their noise levels, say with people playing tennis and them talking. That doesn't seem to be a problem there. So with all our sound mitigating things should at least bring down our conversation levels, okay, to way below what's taking place on elevated tennis courts on the other side of their property. You know, there are also, you know, it's like strange, it would appear that Hillside House was built right next to the Little Club property line. So it must have received a variance to not have the 25-foot setback. You know, that 25 feet would have also decreased the decibel level by approximately 6. So, you know, it's like a little bit more difficult, you know, part of the blame of the sounds, you know, is because the building is built so close to the Little Club. But on the other side, the tennis court's above the property line and Hillside House abuts the property line. And, you know, and I think conversation is probably louder than the actual sound of the rackets. And I don't know whether you've had any problem with sound
I've never
there.
received any complaints about the tennis court noise. But I would say that I know originally I did discuss with the Little Club about simply moving it to the south. And of course, they said that, you know, that's where they stage the carts and you know, for tournaments or activities. But they also said that that would be the area where they would expand the pickleball courts.
Right.
So, I mean, I'm not saying that, you know, one way or the other. I'm just saying that's what was said to me. So, I mean, apparently, you know, there may be a chance that if it's successful, that they might want to expand it to the south. I mean, if you just moved it to the south, it would move it at least, you know, a larger distance from Hillside than it is now. That's just a comment.
Okay.
Yeah.
Are there any questions? Yeah.
Hi, I'm Rob, the general manager at the Little Club. At the beginning of our meeting, the last time we met here 2 months ago, the very first thing that was asked of us if we would put croquet on that area, on that lawn. And there are 30 to 40 people that play croquet at the same time. So 2 months ago, it wasn't a problem for us to put croquet there. I think we could have just been said and done. Pickleball would be in the middle of the golf course and no one would have an issue. And now we're having a discussion about a maximum of 8 people having a conversation while playing pickleball. I just wanted to point that out. It wasn't a problem 2 months ago, but now the sound conversation is possibly an issue in getting this approved. So I don't know what's changed since then as far as decibel levels for speaking, but I would imagine that it's a lot less with 8 people as opposed to 30 or 40.
There was a question.
Yeah, Robert Grassi, St. Andrews. I manage the tennis courts. We do receive complaints from Hillside, generally because of the time of the day and the noise and so forth. We do have landscaping there, but it's not adequate, we agree. So we adhere to the rules, but we have had multiple complaints, unfortunately. So I just wanna let you know.
I'm sorry they come to you.
I know, they don't come every, so I get it all the time, but again, I manage the club and the property HOA, so I'm representing Fairways too at this meeting.
What hours of play are allowed on that tennis court?
Yeah, was it till 5 PM, I think?
9 to 5.
9 to 5, yeah.
Not before 9.
No, and we tried to start a little earlier last year because we were sharing the courts with the Ocean Club, because they were under renovation and they wouldn't allow it. They just would not, they would complain all the time, so. We try to be good neighbors too with everybody. We obviously want to encourage utilization, but it's very difficult with the hours. We would also love to have lights out there too, but we can't do that either. So we can't, it won't work.
And it's very hard to keep, my name is Sophie Bent, I'm from the hillside. It's very hard to keep people from playing on those tennis courts. I've driven by at 7 in the morning and some people are already there in the morning in summer. So just, keeping people to abide by the rule is very difficult.
Anybody else here? Anybody from the Hillside House or St. Andrews here that has a comment? Yes,
I've got
sir.
plenty to say.
Do you want to now take public comment?
Yes, I'm sorry.
So if you would like to make a
Would you
comment,
like
you can
to-
stand up to the microphone. and
Oh, I've got,
Say
yes,
who you are,
thank you.
please.
Good morning, everybody. My name is Sophie Bent. I'm a resident of the Unit 7 at Hillside House. And I want to make some follow-up comments from the last meeting of July 25th, right? I'm resident of apartment 7, which is directly adjacent and the closest to the Ville Club, and I'm also the owner of apartment 1. So I'm directly interested in the pickleball courts. Some of the member of our condominium has, given me some of the comments that I'm going to make. He is a tennis player, but also a novice pickleball player, so he knows a little bit about pickleball, and he agreed to some of those remarks. Those pickleball courts would affect directly about 6 apartments of the Hillside House, all the one on the west side. I remember giving you an article about from Mr. Lance Willis, who is an audiologist, who owns a firm in Tucson, Arizona. And his article sets out some recommendation on the proper distance from pickleball courts for the neighbors. And specifically a distance of 350 feet is recommended for minimal noise abatement, and courts within 150 feet require careful abatement to avoid complaints. I'm very appreciative of the upgrade of those abatement for the noise. However, I am a little concerned still. On the east side of those courts have been addressed. That little court area, that little area where those pickleball are supposed to be, have a resonance that's pretty high, considering that you've got the hillside, which are high, and on the north side you've got the St. Andrews, that's 4 or 5 stories, and then it's an empty parking lot. So there's a lot of resonance. So just a fence on the east side is not going to stop the noise, as well as it's only going to stop the noise for the people on the ground floor. Now you talked a lot about that the pickleball court would be the only problem. I was never for croquet courts or anything, because the ball and the racket is not the only thing that's a problem. Living directly there, I know that when you have evenings during the season and people come on the parking lot and start talking by their car, it directly wakes us up, because it's right there and it's loud. To compare it to a lawnmower that's only 20 minutes long, it's just not, even relevant. And just, how are we going to enforce this racket and ball? I really don't know, considering that we're supposed to only use lawnmower. I think the ordinance of the town of Gulfstream to use lawnmower from 8 in the morning, right? And there's no weekends, I think. And there's not one week where I don't hear the lawnmower right outside my windows before 7 o'clock in the morning from the Ville Club. So enforcement for those balls. I don't believe those balls are really adequate. I don't believe as a tennis player that I would want to play with a training ball. Those balls are lighter. They get affected by the wind. I did my little research too on those balls. I know the sound is better, but no regular pickleball player is going to want to play with those balls. There is no way. So they're not going to want to play with the ball. So what? They're going to go to another facility to play pickleball, or they're actually going to play with their balls. So I just want to know, what do I do then? Do I call the chief of police every time a player plays with a regular pickleball ball and make a complaint? But once those courts are built, what's happening? What do? Do we close the courts? How many, complaints do you need before you do that? Not that I want it to happen, I just want to be able to live in my condominium without the noise, especially at the weekends. We've got all our terrace overlooking the little club. When you do your dog show, it's a day where it is better for us to go somewhere else because it's deafening. The noise is just, but it happens once a year. So as good neighbors, we just let it happen. But 9 to 5 every day, pickleball is popular. People on a croquet, on a tennis court or pickleball court get very excited. I get very excited when I play tennis. People scream, they don't just have a normal conversation. So the noise, it's not just ball and racket, unfortunately. So the noise abatement, well, I heard that the acoustic fence does make a difference. The rubberized court does too. But I still don't believe that it's adequate to make it happen. The courts are permanent, so I want to know what happens if it does produce too much noise for the people that are above those fences. I don't believe there's any compelling reason to act now. I assume that all the members of this committee have gone down to the tennis center to observe a pickleball game, to see the noise it generates, not just from the ball and the racket. I really think that this application to build a court should be denied or postponed until alternative plans can be studied and the view of all the neighbors included in the process. It just seems that this project is trying to be pushed during the summer months where most of the residents are not actually being able to attend. And I don't think that's right. I think everybody should have a voice, not just with the letters and the emails. I wonder also if, there has been a study made with an acoustic company that would actually give you all of the requirements that's needed for this specific area. It's just the decibel. I've tried myself to check with the decibel. It just seems to be very hard to estimate what's the decibel level of a pickleball court compared to a dog barking. And I know there's an ordinance in the city of Gulfstream for dog barking. And I don't think dog barks from 9 to 5 every day. So that's all I had to say.
While you're still there, I don't know if you can speak entirely for everyone that's living in the Hillside House, but there was one of the photos in here shows that there's like a space immediately south of where they're proposing the pickleball course. It looks about the exact same size as the space where they're proposing. Would you be in favor if they move that whole construction down into that section?
Honestly, unless we have a real study from an acoustic company that's going to tell us that it's going to make less noise by being pushed south, all of our terraces are right there.
Okay.
The 6 apartments have their terrace right on that area. And in the winter, everybody's out. So having pickleball courts where you can play 9 to 5 from 7 days a week, is always gonna be an issue, I believe. It's
Thank
like
you.
having you were talking about having, dinner parties and, on those courts. It's like it terrifies me when you're saying that. The difference between those tennis courts and those pickleball courts is the people who purchased their condos on the tennis side knew they were tennis courts. When we purchased our condos on the west side, there was a golf course. It was just a golf course. It was not a racket club. The difference in activity and noise level is considerable. It's just, it doesn't compare.
Thank you. Someone else?
I have a question.
Go ahead, Curtis.
Yeah, well, so one thing you said about people using their own pickleball, rather than using the rubberized ball, I mean, I am presuming that anyone playing on these courts is gonna have to check into the golf shop to get the equipment. They're not gonna be allowed to bring their own equipment. I also am thinking that the average age of the little club is not going to support a 9 to 5 kind of pickleball usage. I think what I'm hearing from you is that regardless of what mitigation is done, you just do not want those pickleball courts there. I'm thinking that the club is trying to make some accommodation for you, but I don't hear you being able to come to any kind of a conclusion that it would be permissible under any circumstance. Is that correct?
Not completely. As I said, I didn't purchase my condo thinking there would be a racket club there, but that there would be a golf course. It's just that I'm not believing, I would like to be able to trust that, all of that is being offered, and I'm appreciative of their efforts, is actually going to make a difference. But I can't honestly, at this point, feel that it's going to make a difference, because noise carries up. So it's not that I don't ever want it, it's just that I don't feel that, I don't feel like just, a fence on the east side or even north and east is really going to make a difference in the noise level right there.
Well, the report that was submitted by Spenglari and Willis Acoustics from Tucson, the one that was submitted by you, tells exactly, well, not exactly, but tells to a fairly full extent what can be done. 8-foot walls, the types of walls, the acoustinet, noise suppressor, the use of paddles that absorb noise, and the club is taking all of those suggestions. So I don't see how we're going to be able to satisfy you.
Well, right now there are doing some, but just the fence and with the acoustic fencing is only on the east side.
No, we just discussed that earlier. I made the suggestion that it would be on the east side as well as on the north side to protect the people in St. Andrews, because many, I've read the 9 letters, each of the 9 letters, and I read the 2 pro letters from, Carol Stanley and George Linder. And I also read the Spenglari and Willis
absolutely agree. I'd like to have a little more assurance. As I said, this area has a real resonance, and I know that there's nothing that's, offered on the south or the west side of those fans, so the noise will carry and resonate. So that's my concern. Also, when I'm hearing about having, I don't know if that's even a consideration of doing anything at night on those courts, but I want to make sure that, that never happens, because that just, so I just want a little more assurance that, that is,
There will be no light at all on the court, so there's not going to be any night activity. There was also something in the Insight Studio presentation that I wanted to address, and that was in the application request, it says that 2 pickleball courts are going to be built, and there is room for additional pickleball courts. Well, I'd like to get that on the table right now and suggest that perhaps the club take that out of the proposal and limit it to 2 pickleball courts so that there wouldn't be any increase, and regardless of how much the courts are being used.
my view is that there's a lot of trouble with pickleball noise, not just because of the ball and the racket, but because of all the activities and the noise that's produced. I just want a little more assurance, and I'm just not believing that I'm just seeing it at this point. That's it.
Well, okay, thank you.
Okay.
I just have a question.
Yes.
What assurance are you looking for?
That's, there's just not just one side, it's more than one side, that's on our side. I would really wish that you had an acoustic person that would actually study that side, because as I say, the resonance is really, okay.
The board asked us to pay a third party and to not use existing information available to have somebody come over and do a sound study, which we presented today.
Okay, and so he felt that just one side with the acoustic board would just be enough.
That was without the acoustic fence. We can't produce the rubberized surface and the acoustic fence without actually building the courts. So it came in on an average of 47.4 decibels for actual people playing, which is less than our conversation right now, which is at about 70, 75. So we did the necessary requirements that the board asked and that you wanted in order to move this process forward.
Okay, so.
So in adding the rubberized surface and the
Okay,
acoustic
so what
fence,
assurance do I have that if people don't want to play with your rubberized balls,
they don't play.
what happens? And then those courts are never used?
Maybe. I don't know.
Okay.
We don't have pickleball now, so it's hard to anticipate how it's going to be used.
Okay, so what if they do use the hard balls, then what happens from the
Then
city
they'll
of
stop.
Gulfstream?
Well, it's the
Do
same
they
way.
close the courts? What's the measures, I guess I kind of want to know the worst and the best case scenario?
The code does have noise ordinances that specifically outlines that if there are in fact nuisances created, that sound abatement is required to lessen those to a certain decibel level. It's actually defined for generators. The code allows generators up to 76 decibels, 10 feet from a property boundary. That's anywhere in the town. That's a pretty high decibel level, and we're talking about decibel levels that are 10, 15 decibels lower than that is what we're proposing, and we're doing significant abatement that's not even taken into consideration with the decibel levels we're receiving. So there are provisions in the code that can actually limit what they're allowed to do if in fact, if the courts are built and someone comes out and says, oh, this is actually 80 decibels, well then we're violating what the code says the decibel level is.
Because there's a difference between, any code ordinance with noise that just limits it in time to where, your neighbors are having a party or the dog is barking. With pickleball courts, from what I'm hearing from how much it brings people out. And I know that the majority of the little clubs have older population, but they also have their kids and their grandkids coming. So we're talking about, not just the old population here. And if those courts are used from 9 to 5, just a simple conversation right there is just really going to trouble the peace of those condominiums. that's, you know, my take on it, because I live there and I know when people are talking in the parking lot that, you know, you just kind of like, when are they leaving? So,
Okay, there are
I think there's
other
other people
comments.
that
Well, Sophie, another thing, you are concerned and worried that the courts are gonna be used from 9 to 5. What would be your suggestion of appropriate court hours?
I'd like them not to be used at the weekend, so I can enjoy my house, but I know that's not gonna happen.
Well, I mean, this is not a quiet zone. You know, we're not talking about a library here, and, I don't know how to accommodate you.
My name is Richard Lucas. I live in the Hillside House, unit number 8. I'd like to, this is going to be much briefer, very brief. I'd like to, you know, there was this big thing at the last meeting I thought was very well brought up. Think as a good neighbor, act as a good neighbor. Little Club has never tried to act as a good neighbor in this at all. They scheduled them in July, thinking they were going to shove it through. You called them on it. Then there was this claim that, well, we talked to the president of the Hillside House, and he was for it. And then Miss Rita here read into the letter that they were against it. They said there was never any complaints from the tennis courts. There are complaints from the tennis courts. When you guys mentioned the fact that, well, it was brought up, why don't we move the pickleball, or the pickleball to the center of the golf course? What the Little Club did immediately after that, they finished building they rushed to finish all of the croquet courts, so now they're all newly built. I'm not a member of the Little Club. I do go there a lot in the summer. I'm a member of the Ocean Club. And I do know that one of the biggest issues being a member there for a long time is not the members. The biggest issue in dealing with people who go to the clubs are the members' children and grandchildren. They have a tendency in every aspect of life, whether it's at the beach, whether it's the tennis courts, whether it's going to be, hopefully not, the croquet courts, they break rules. And it all comes down to all the time, well, that's so-and-so's daughter and so-and-so's grandson. I don't know if we should say anything. And then it comes down, who's going to police this? And it's well, it's in the pro shop. Well, are they going to be going out checking all day that these kids, children and grandchildren aren't using their rackets? There are going to be a lot of complaints to you. There just is. And you will have to do something. I don't want to negotiate at all. I think being a good neighbor is, would any of you want these pickleball courts next to your place? Seriously, would any of you even consider approving something like that? I don't think you would. And it's my place, and I don't care, I don't want to accommodate the Little Club, because I don't think they've acted in good faith. I didn't move in there thinking there were going to be a croquet, a pickleball, a racket club. There's certain things that are just common sense, and I don't want to negotiate. I think you should vote no. I think you shouldn't allow it. It's not, the club has survived for decades, since I've been down here in '91. It survived for decades without pickleball courts. Why do you need it now? Thank you for listening, and I appreciate the opportunity. Thank
Any
you.
questions? Well, wait a second. Any questions, Curtis?
I hear full well that there is just ongoing, sentiment of not having them from a large group. So, there hasn't been any kind of feeling of, getting together on this, and it doesn't sound like it's remedial. So,
Thank you, Curtis. Are there any other questions or comments? Yes, sir.
Just a comment, I just wanted to be read in the record. Again, Robert Grassi, St. Andrews. My president asked me, Fairways 2, just to represent the fact that we have 40 units north of the property, so your letter of 1 was a letter of approximately 40.
We probably received 9 or 10 besides the one.
That's all I would say. Thank you very much.
The couple things that, as a reminder here, that it was mentioned in a letter from Virginia Genero, who I believe is a resident of the Hillside House, where she has done her homework, and we're governed here, so everyone knows, really by the town's code of ordinances, which are the rules that we're supposed to be interpreting this on, and in one of them, in section 66-352, it states, "Nor shall anything be constructed or maintained that would in any way constitute a nuisance to adjacent property owners, residents, or the community." Further, going into section 66-368, it refers to tennis courts, but the pickleball comes under the tennis courts regulations. It says, "No tennis courts shall be located, designed, operated, or maintained so as to interfere unduly with the enjoyment of the property rights by owners of property adjoining the courts." So that's fairly strong language, and when you hear that language, which is what's governing our decisions here, it doesn't really give us a whole lot of hope, but we all live in the town. Some of us are members of the club. Greg mentioned something to me a minute ago that's pretty important. It sounds like the acoustics thing is constantly coming up in all the questions here, and we don't have really exact answers. One choice, and I know you don't want to hear this, is we could defer this conversation another month and ask that the gentleman, the professional from Cooper City, come down to the meeting and be a real expert here to talk about acoustics. Or we could say we've heard enough about it, we could vote on it now if someone wants to make a motion, or we could also, as Bob suggested, we could upstream this to the city council. I don't know if it's fair to do that to them, because they haven't been involved in the last two meetings and would probably want to go through it all over again. Does anybody else have any questions or comments? Is anyone prepared to make a motion at this time? Yes.
Could I just make a comment, in terms of his suggestion of sending this to the town commission? You are a recommending board, so in sending it to them, you would really be required to at least send them a recommendation.
Okay, either a yea or a nay, and then the little club would have the right to go to the council. If we decline.
Right, that would be a board of adjustment.
Right, well, right, if you decided to send it up to the commission level, you would have to make a recommendation and it would automatically go to the commission. As opposed to making a final decision now, which they could appeal to the commission if they wanted to.
Yeah, if you acted as the final arbiter today, then whichever way you decided, I mean, they could request it.
But I do think you make a good point that the ARPB has heard a lot over the last two meetings and has I think a firm grasp on the application.
But having said that, when it gets to the commission, they're gonna be asking all these kind of questions. I just know how it works.
Right.
Did the ARP look into this? How many people that wanna read all the letters, they're gonna get all of a sudden back into it,
Well, so we have the opportunity to make a motion to decline the request, or we can approve the request with stipulations that the number have been mentioned here during the course of the meeting. Curtis, are you prepared to make a motion one way or the other?
I am not prepared to make a motion because I think that either we have to get, somehow, we have to get a little bit more consensus between the proposers of the pickleball courts and the residents. And if this requires more in-depth study
been very civil, and I don't think there's a great deal of anger, but Curtis, do you feel, or does anybody on the committee feel that waiting another 30 days would help? And if so, what would we want the parties to do in that 30-day period of time? We certainly want an acoustics expert to come, you know.
Right, and maybe just see, on the plans, the acoustic membrane, whatever it's called, on the northern side. And, you know, maybe if it can beautify the area too.
Landscape the heck out of it.
Yeah, that's it, so beautifying hillside houses as well as.
I'd like to say that I'm inclined to approve it with a long list of, you know, concessionary acoustic type things and hours of play and all that type of thing. I do think the club's been bending over backwards to accommodate these folks, but I also think an additional 30 days wouldn't hurt to see if we can get the two parties together so that both sides can nod their heads and say, okay, we'll go with it. But I thought it was important for me to kind of indicate where my head was on this, so at least you get a feeling for one member where he's kind of coming down on it. So I just, I think another 30 days would be fine. You know, these sunshine laws make it really difficult in these matters because we can't discuss this except when I'm out here in
Brian?
Yeah, I think we feel as a club and their representative that we've done a lot. I mean, we've presented everything to you today. We all went out there and heard the balls. I mean, those balls are negligible. You can't even hear them. There were some crickets and birds in the background that were louder than those balls. I mean, we've done everything we can. We've done the rubberized surface. We've done the acoustic fence. We're willing to add it on the north side. We're willing to add some additional vegetation. 30 days, I don't know that anything's going to be accomplished. Rob and his community have reached out to the Hillside Home. There's been, no willingness to meet, no willingness to compromise. I think we heard that again today. I think at this point we'd like to, hear a vote if somebody would make a motion, because I don't know what we can accomplish in another 30 days. If there's some conditions, maybe we can talk about some draft conditions that you guys would be looking for. Obviously, the balls would be required, the vegetation, additional trees. We could put some, large trees in there, maybe some bamboo, whatever it is that would help with, screening or, more dense plantings. But I don't know that 30 more days is really gonna do a whole lot for either party.
I'm not prepared to make a motion because there's too much detail that I would like to have written out. I'd like to read it. I'd like to have all the detail if we're gonna take a vote on a motion, as opposed to just willy-nilly, kind of, more landscaping, or limit the hours, or this, that, the other thing. So that's where I come down.
Well, I think then if there is a postponement, obviously we would need very clear direction, because again, we think we've tried to do everything we possibly could at this
Okay,
point.
we'll get back to it just a second. Go ahead, sir.
What about a vote of the members of the Little Club? This is a board thing. This has never been presented to the members of the Little Club. They don't know how their money's being spent. They don't know what the cost is. Their board has decided, without any approval of any of the members, to go forward with this. What if you get what if they're just a third party do a ballot to the members of the Little Club? Do you even want this? Because as has been mentioned many times, this is not a sport that's built towards my age for playing. I mean, I wouldn't be caught dead on a on the court. The other thing is, but your little exhibition out there. Have you ever seen pickleball players? Good ones? You guys are like playing. You guys are like doing like I play tennis. Okay. These guys get out there and they start whacking the ball all over the place. That was sort of a facade. It's just an opinion. I made my point. Thank you.
Well, we can't mandate what the Little Club does in terms of voting with their membership.
But it'd be nice to know what the members think.
But I don't think it's something we can ask a private club to do. Or certainly can't make them do that. Go
I
ahead.
do have to say that the Hillside Club has members from the Little Club, so, and those members are not in favor, obviously, of the pickleball courts. Also, you're talking about maybe, if you're not making a decision today to delay 30 days, what about delaying to where we have all the residents in Gulfstream? Because most of them are not in residence until the winter, to where they have their voice.
Right, so for us to move forward, we need to have a motion, and it doesn't sound like any of the five of us are willing to make a motion to approve today. Doesn't mean we wouldn't in the future, so I guess the only other motion would be to postpone, and I know the Little Club doesn't want that, but I agree with them, if we postpone, we need to tell them what they need to do in the postponement period.
And we would, sorry to interrupt, but I mean, we would love to have some meetings and some dialogue with the, outside of this chamber, you know, to try to be good neighbors.
Go ahead.
Mr. Chairman, Mr. Nazaro just mentioned, and I would agree, and it would be available to do that. Dr. D would rather have a better explanation of what kind of conditions might be placed on this if we did approve it. I would certainly be available as a kind of mediator to meet with both sides so we can come in perhaps and develop conditions that we need to place on this. I mean, we've thrown some out here, but they could certainly come into the town hall, both sides, and we could, discuss.
Well,
Try to come to.
We don't have to wait 30 days if that's an issue. I
When can
mean,
we postpone it till?
Well, that would have to be.
October 24th.
oh, we do have to kind of, we can't,
Right, I mean, it would have, unless you wanna have a special meeting, sooner, but I mean, we have a regularly scheduled meeting, of course, would be the October meeting. I mean, that's a
Would you,
suggestion.
with the Hillside House, be willing to meet with the Little Club and?
The Hillside House are not in residence, I'm the only one in residence.
When will some of your neighbors be returning, do you know?
After Christmas, usually or just before,
Yeah.
after Thanksgiving, that's, but that's the same with the St. Andrews Club. Most of the members are not in residence, most of the neighbors are not in residence.
well, telephone,
Oh, I know.
video
I
hookup, I
know.
mean, we live in a modern world, maybe that could be arranged. It demonstrates some
You
good
seem
faith.
like a pretty good representative for them. Maybe you could meet with the club, or maybe even the gentleman that just stepped out for a second, maybe the two of you could meet with them. I think, as Curtis said earlier, we're trying to make this work for everybody, but sometimes that doesn't work in government, somebody's arguing 65 and somebody's arguing 70, so they say, let's pick 67 and a half, that's government, but that's not what we want, we don't really want to do that.
I mean, Mr.
Go ahead,
Chairman,
Greg.
usually it's better, to come to some kind of agreement. It's easier to do it with a smaller group that is representing both sides, as to have 20 or 30 people in here that are just, throwing things at each other, and so.
So Greg and Trey, certainly they can have a meeting here outside of
Yeah.
ARPB, but would any of the members of the Architecture Review Board, they would not be participants, correct?
Yeah, they're, correct.
Would you like to do that on behalf of the Hillside House? Would you like to meet with the Little Club if they're willing to do it? Is there-
Again,
St.
Fairways
Andrews
2,
would like to be involved in that?
Fairways 2 would want a representative there as
Sure.
well.
It may sound like a pretty good idea, it's another 30 days, I know that no one wants to wait, but we may be able to come to a better conclusion. You may not, you may leave the meeting as we are now, and then we would then vote on October 24th based on what we learned from that meeting.
I hate not to compromise, I know they've, done their part. The thing, as Richard was saying, would any of you want to have a pickleball court, however, 25 feet from your window, whether it's rubberized surface, or paddled, and ball, I don't think so. I don't. So I'm not sure what it's gonna accomplish, to be honest.
I mean, it is a recreational facility, and recreational uses are allowed, obviously, we're not trying
Yeah,
to create a
but both
nuisance,
next
so
to
we're
golf course.
mitigating every nuisance possible as much as we can.
Yeah, but you heard what I read earlier.
About a tennis court.
No, when I'm reading what the code dictates that we do about protecting neighbors' rights.
Yes,
Okay, so even
Little
if you
club has
wanted to
always-
put tennis, or you wanted to put a 19th hole in there for golf, we would have to address the same issues. Is it interfering with
Right.
the neighbors?
Right.
Okay.
I get that, and we've tried to address that.
I mean, we purchased next to a golf course, not a racket club. That's, all
So
the
would
difference.
it, so that we know, would you be willing, would St. Andrews and the Hillside House be willing to meet with the Little Club, and would the Little Club meet with them?
Yes,
Um,
yes, of course,
Can
we
you do
would, yes.
We would, not sure what it would accomplish, but yes.
Well, you've got,
I mean,
the
we'll see,
legal and city
but yes,
managers and
we're
leaders
willing.
will probably be a part of it. You've got a pretty good team there that's gonna help guide you, and they also know what can and cannot be done within the code.
Okay.
Can I ask for recommendations specifically from the board
Um,
in putting conditions in for an approval in the future? Because we sent an email to all of the Hillside group on 9/12. I sent a certified letter to Sophie Bent that she received on 9/18. I've invited everybody over to our property to have this conversation, and no one showed up.
They're not here, are they? Just
No, they haven't. They're not. But I have one response via email. Mr. Cutter, I believe, Cutter or Cutler. He responded to me with a very speculative email, and that's all. That's the only conversation we've had. And quite honestly, if we sit in a room with Mr. Lucas, who had left, there is no condition. His condition is no condition. So I honestly don't see that where that's gonna help us move this process forward to have any answer, whether it's a yes or a no. But as far as condition,
What it might do is help some of our commissioners who, Doherty is, he'd like more, you know, specific, you know, if we do create if we do create conditions, and he'd like some more specificity, and I'm not sure that he's prepared to do that right now.
no, and I want that as well. I would love to have that on record, but I would like it to come.
That's actually what you're asking for now.
I am asking for that, but I would like it to come from the committee, because up until this point, Hillside has had no ability to negotiate with us, nor do they want to.
Well, that's what we would attempt. I understand, and I heard everything that you heard today, and Mr. Roche made some good, valid points. That it sounds like that, you know, the Hillside House and the other representatives perhaps they're not finding any place for compromise.
Right.
And so that's what we would be attempting to do. And it may end up, as you say, still, is that gonna help or get us anywhere? And it may not, but at least we've made an attempt to do that. I don't know, this is.
We're available anytime. That's not a problem for us. So.
Just a comment, I think it was Mr. Graziano's letter that had some good points in there that maybe, and Little Club, I think, has implemented some of them already.
Okay.
Hedges and fencing and all that. He had some good points, and I think he's against it, but, you know, wishing that he could see these 6, 7 things happen, and they were nice ideas, and some of them were already in play.
well, you know, some of the things that were mentioned, north side, sound.
Right, I mean, I think that's
Maybe
a
more
given.
dense landscaping, restrictions, no night activity under any circumstances. You know, you could have cocktail, maybe no social activity on the courts at all, I don't know. I'm not saying that's definite, but that's one of the things that was mentioned. Well, another big stipulation you're probably gonna hear is that you probably have to commit to us that you're never gonna build any more, come back for other additional pickleball courts. So you may need to think, do we really wanna commit to that? I don't know, but that was one that was mentioned. Play or noise we talked about, sound block heights. Signage rules, I think those things, you already heard all of those. Were there any other specific items?
I think that covers a lot. I'd like to see it all listed on a piece of
Yeah,
paper,
yeah,
in black and white.
And you guys would like to have someone else come and talk more about the noise, or, yeah,
We hate for you to incur the cost.
I mean, there was a lot of discussion about it today, and, you know, I know you.
the study's been done and it kind of shows.
No, I understand that, but, again, there's language in there that kind of, you know, it
Confusing
says
all
what it
of us.
says. So, and you're not, you did a good job of getting through the report and
Right.
trying to explain it, but, I mean, there were several discussions regarding the noise and acoustics that I think if the people that generated the analysis would have been here and might have helped today while we were here today. I mean, typically
I actually agree with that.
if you have a traffic analysis
Right, no, I
done with a new 10-story building at the corner of PGA and Military, the traffic expert is gonna be there, and in my experience in Palm Beach Gardens, typically they said that adding a 10-story building would even reduce the traffic problem, but normally the experts are there,
Understood.
so.
And they're out of Cooper City, right? So
They are, yeah.
It's a day's worth of travel and time or whatever, right?
It is.
Except we're trying to really get to the bottom of it. If the actual engineer could talk to us, I think it might be beneficial.
I mean, we're seeking reassurance. That's mostly, you know, it's scary. What you're offering right next to my window is scary.
And I'll kind of sum it up. I mean, you guys have done a really good job in addressing the comments that were generated at the first meeting that we had and today. But I think there's just that, you know, small opportunity where maybe we can, you know, get, you know, some more agreement between the two sides, because right now it just sounds like it's either, you know, one side says no and the other side, you know.
I mean, it's not just the noise. I mean, we had real estate agents telling us that our real estate is, you know, value is gonna go down because of it, so.
But, you know, I totally
I'm not,
compliment
you know,
the efforts that you guys have made to, you know, to address it, and that's, you know, that's how these kind of things work. I mean, you try to get some compromise, and you've done a good job at that, in my opinion.
Would it be helpful if the little club provided rules of play and things along that line? You know, to, you know, get over the idea that people are gonna be bringing their own paddles and their own balls and things like that. Obviously, we want to keep the noise down. We want to keep both the verbal noise, well, the verbal noise you can't control. Just like if somebody gets a hole in one on the first hole of the golf course, you know, everybody's gonna be screaming. And, you know, if that annoys the people in the hillside house, you know, that happens. You can't control that, but you can control rules of play and time of play, and also the acoustical netting and the edging and the tree, you know, building or whatever, you know, tree placement. So, but if something can be worked out with an additional meeting, fine. If you don't think that, if the two sides don't think anything can be worked out with an additional meeting, then, you know, we are happy to go ahead and make a motion and see how it flies.
Would it benefit you by meeting in the next 30 days? We can't make you do that.
I would love to.
Okay. And I think the important thing out of the meeting would be, maybe it will go nowhere, but I think the city manager will be attending the meeting. It would be good if we, the committee, you know, kind of had a really more specific list of whatever the rules are that we're gonna govern. And we just mentioned some of those, and there'll probably be more that come out of the meeting. Okay. We apologize for the delay. Can we get a motion to delay?
I'll make a motion to delay
Until October.
until the October.
24th meeting. It's been moved and seconded.
I did.
Rita?
Mr. Doherty?
Yes.
Mrs. Jones?
Yes.
Mrs. Smith?
Yes.
Mr. Ralph?
Yes.
Chairman Smith?
Yes. Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Okay, I think, are there any items that need to come before the board? You'd like to discuss? Any comments from the public? That I can cover? No? Move for adjournment. Okay, thank you.